Bhartiya, and we are here at the Oracle Open Word and Code One Summit, and today we have with us the creator of Python, Guido. First of all, welcome to the show, and I've been following you for a while, so it's good to meet another, kind of luminary from the open source world. So thanks for, meeting me today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. So first of all, what are you doing here?
I was ready to come here to receive a Groundbreaker Award, which is a new kind of award that they're giving out to a very small number of people who have been creating or influential in major open source projects.
Why did you create Python? Any personal, anecdote that you like, or when it happened, you like, oh, like Apple fell, and you're like, oh, I have to create Python.
Yeah, that's sort of that. I don't know how much this is like a revisionist origin story, but the story I always tell is I was working as a programmer on a project named Amoeba, which was a distributed system, and it was actually a microkernel-based system. You can look it up. It's still famous in research circles. Amoeba resulted in a lot of good new ideas and a lot of PhDs and papers. Andrew Tannenbaum was involved. And all his PhD students basically created parts of Amoeba. So I was just a programmer, and we were using a very primitive Amoeba cluster we had built out of microvax machines to prove that you could use Amoeba for a programmer's day-to-day use. And we wanted to develop a suite of applications, or often simple utilities, that would sort of be the equivalent in the Amoeba world of the standard Unix utilities. And so one of Amoeba's hang-ups was that it was very much not like Unix. And so we wrote our own login application, we had our own file system, we had our own backup tool, and I was part of a small team that was writing those applications after the sort of the core of the operating system kernel had been implemented by the PhD students on the other half of the team. And I was fed up because we had there were exactly two programming languages you could use. You could write your application either in C or as a shell script. And I think it was like some kind of crufty port of the Unix v7 shell. So not very powerful as shell scripting go. And so if you didn't want to do it as a shell script, you had to write a full-fledged C program with all the sort of issues, like suppose you wanted to read lines from a file. You'd have to sort of implement your own I/O library, your own linked list implementation, your own memory allocation. And it was all very tedious. And I realized that with the size of team that we had and the number of applications that we estimated we had to write, there was just no way we could finish. And I thought, well, if there was a programming language that was somewhere in between shell and C, then we would be much more productive, because we wouldn't have to do everything as a shell script. I mean, scripts are nice and compact, but they're slow, and as soon as you want serious logic or anything involving arithmetic, it's very clumsy and error-prone. But C was overkill for many of the applications we were thinking of, and so I thought, well, what we need is an interpreted programming language that has a compact, concise syntax, but is more readable and has more features that allow you to write larger programs. I mean, it's optimized for, say, programs between 100 and 1,000 lines rather than shell scripts, which are ideally 5 or 10 lines. So this was combined with my experience on a previous project where I had learned a lot about implementing an interpreted programming language that, like so many projects, was built and released but never caught on and then canceled. You can still find it. It's called ABC. The only way to find it on Google is sort of Google for ABC Python predecessor, because there are too many other things named ABC.
Right.
But anyway, so I didn't start from scratch. I started with the idea of, well, what if I took all the good features from ABC, but removed all the bad features and replaced them with things that I thought would make better features. And I had initially given myself about 3 months for doing that, which was a large chunk of our project time, but we weren't very tightly managed. The team manager was, I think he was on a sabbatical, or at least sort of, he let us decide what we wanted to do, and I had a lot of extra time. So in 3 months, while still doing my day job of writing applications for Amoeba, I also, in my spare time, weekends, evenings, plus some of my day time for sure, I created the first prototype implementation of Python. And we almost immediately started using it. But soon we found that Python was more popular outside the Amoeba project than it was in the Amoeba project. And that got the ball rolling. Last July, there was a sequence of events that eventually led to me resigning as the BDFL from the Python community, and gradually, slowly since then, I've actually stopped being so closely involved. We're currently in a transitional phase where the core developers, and of which I am still one, just no longer the leader, the core developers are going to choose a new form of governance specifically for the core development team, which is, depending on how you count, maybe 30 really active people, maybe 90 people who have some activity in the last few years, maybe double the amount if you count everyone who ever was a core developer. We're going to set up a new form of governance. We haven't decided yet what that will be. There's actually an interesting time ahead where we currently have about 5 or 6 different proposals for new governance systems. And in November, there's going to be a vote among the core developers about that. And then there will be another vote that will actually determine specifically who is going to form the leadership. So we're starting out by choosing a constitution, and then using the rules set out in the selected constitution, we're going to vote for a sort of a leadership.
When you were still a dictator of the project, did it ever occur to you that there should be a governance model, or to ensure the sustainability of the project? Because Python, the way it's been used, so widely, did it ever occur to you at that point, or you were like just so involved with the project that it never occurred to you?
I think that it occurred to me somewhat. I mean, I certainly have been toying with the thought of retiring from my position as BDFL for a long time. I think I brought that up maybe 5 years ago in a keynote where I said, well, eventually I might want to retire before I die. The interesting thing is that the Python community, in a sense, started with an email where someone wrote, "What if Guido were hit by a bus?" So the possibility of me no longer being available has always been on the mind of the Python community. So in that sense, I think the eventual need for a governance system was not a surprise. We've also, since about 2000, we've had a pretty formal process for deciding language design issues and also community issues. You may have heard of the process we have. It's called PEP, or Python Enhancement Proposal. We actually modeled it after something that was in common use in the Internet Protocol Standards world, RFCs. There are still many RFCs that are regularly quoted by number: email standards, web standards, internet standards. Anyway, so in the Python world, we have Python enhancement proposals. We have many hundreds of these by now. A majority probably were reviewed and approved by me, but only ever after a long discussion and revision process. So it's the D in BDFL has always been a joke, because I never dictate what should happen. I sort of take the temperature of the community, and then I make my best guess at, well, we should probably do this because that's what has the most support. And occasionally it's like, well, I can tell whether we should do something or not. Then we have a rule: status quo wins. So if there is a risky move that we're not really convinced of making, then we probably won't make it. Sometimes I also had to override those things, but it's always been after debate. Mm-hmm. It's never been sort of arbitrary and random.
It's never you made a decision and then there is debate happening. That's why you did that.
Well,
it happened.
that certainly happens too, and so what led to my resignation was a form of that, where on social media, and I've got a feeling that social media are sort of getting out of hand. Well, if you look at US politics, there's no doubt about that. That's all I want to say about US politics at this point. But for me personally, social media definitely sort of caused additional stress, and I did not enjoy it when core developers were sort of sending tweets where they were questioning my authority or the wisdom of my decisions, rather than saying it to my face and having an honest debate about things.
If you look at open source community, like Linux is a good example where Linux gets beaten up sometimes, but transparency is also one of the factors that everything happens transparently. I asked him also that would he prefer there is a private channel on LKML. He said no, I want things. So
absolutely.
So from your perspective, what was that really got on your nerves that it should? So what was that triggered you that no, I'm done?
Well, it might just have to do with the fact that I've had this role for 28 years. I started writing the first lines of code in December 1989. Our first open source release was in 1991, so Python, the public version of Python is 27 years old. And all that time, I've been sort of the final decider, the final arbiter. I'm getting older. I'm not always available. I sort of, man, you should see how many pills I take every night and sometimes during the day to sort of stay around. So I just want to spend less time feeling stressed about what is the community, what is sort of. I had this attitude where everything that was being said on some of the mailing lists, Python ideas, Python dev, sort of touched me. I felt involved in everything because ultimately every idea would end on my table, on my desk for deciding. And I just thought that should be a responsibility that should either be shared or transferred.
Yeah, I mean, you erected the project. It's a very successful project, so it's more like hand over the mantle to the successor. But as you move out of the project, is there anything that worries you that this may go wrong? Is there any concern that you have in your back of your mind?
I don't actually. One of the things, given that I've been on the project for such a long time, I mean, and some of the currently active core developers are good personal friends that I've known for 20 years or more. So I am completely confident that the sort of more experienced core developers that we currently have, plus the sort of the newer core developers that we have, together will be able to weather any kind of storm that might come Python's way. I mean, yes, I sort of resigned from the title suddenly, but there were a lot of responsibilities that I had already completely delegated. I mean, I barely touched the code base. I barely reviewed
You're more or less like
submissions.
manager kind of role, right? Kind of.
I don't like the term manager. I don't like management in general.
Right. But,
I mean,
you're not dealing with the code in general, but
I'm
oversight.
mostly not dealing with code, but sort of. Well, the thing is, I'm not so much dealing with people, although that sort of.
Do you like to deal with people or not?
I don't know. I'm not necessarily very good at dealing with people by nature. I'm kind of geeky and sort of on the autistic spectrum, as they say. I think I've done okay dealing with the community, but the community has also done okay dealing with me.
Right.
But I'm confident that the community we have is very healthy. And what I've seen so far of the debate about the new governance process has also been healthy. But it's for my personal mental and physical health, it's important that sort of I take a step away from that so I don't have to stress out every night about, people are fighting about voting systems. I am confident that even if there is debate about voting systems, whatever the outcome is, I will be able to live with it. And so I don't have to worry.
I think it's easy for you to say that you won't worry, but it's your baby. So if something does go wrong, you will be worried.
Well, shit. If my son, when he is 28, is still living under my roof, I've done something wrong, right?
That's true too, yeah.
So
that's actually very good.
In terms of it's my baby, eventually you're supposed to raise your child for independence.
Right.
And I actually have a 16-year-old, and that's still a challenge.
Yes.
He's going to live under my roof a few more years, and he's a good kid, so I have no regrets there. But at some point, he's going to go off on his own.
But even when our kids grow up, we don't stop worrying about them. Even when they're at college, we still, like once in a while we have. So you will still be around,
I'm still going to be around.
Exactly. That's what my point was. Since you created Python until this whole social networking fiasco that happened, has there ever been any moment where you got frustrated or angry, that no, this is not right?
Not before, I believe.
Okay, this is the one that happened throughout the history.
Yeah.
Okay. What are you doing these days?
Well, until a few months ago, I was still Python's BDFL, and while I wasn't involved much directly in accepting and reviewing patches, I was still very much directly involved in designing future language features and deciding all sorts of tricky issues, either where different sort of core developers could not necessarily agree, or where there was a disagreement possible. For example, you always have these things where it's not clear whether something is a bug or a feature. Should we fix it? Should we treat it as a feature, but we can still fix it in the next release? Or is it just an outright bug that we can fix in the next bug fix release? Those kind of things I was still involved in. But my main activity was probably Python enhancement proposals. In addition to that, I was and still am a principal engineer at Dropbox, which is actually where I spend most of my time.
When we look at today's technology world, everything is moving towards cloud, everything is going to microservices, serverless. So what is going to be the scope of Python 5 years from now?
Well, in those spaces, Python is going to be very successful. It's going to be in all the tools. People are going to write serverless applications in Python. People are going to write server-full applications in Python like they've always done. That's like, there's no doubt that Python will continue to be successful in that space. Yeah, the cloud, I mean, more than 10 years ago, I was part of a team at Google that launched App Engine. And for the first year that App Engine was public, it only supported Python as a language. So that was Google's first bit of sort of public cloud offering. Now they have a lot more, but that was Python. And so Python has always been in the cloud. I mean, Python has always also been a very important application for developing web applications. Web applications have sort of traditionally been the first to move into the cloud. So Python is very comfortable in the cloud.
These days we hear a lot about diversity. And when I look at the open source world, I was talking to Kelsey Hightower, from the Kubernetes project, and he said the beauty of open source is that you don't have to prove yourself to get involved. You can get involved, and start contributing to code. But we don't see that much diversity even in the open source world. A lot of projects are there where you see a very monoculture. So what is your take on diversity, number one?
If you say our project is open, anybody can come and join us, anybody can contribute, you're really underestimating the issues. Because it's not just joining a project that's the problem, it's staying in the project, which means you have to feel comfortable exchanging emails and code reviews and what all with people that you don't know personally, but you sort of communicate with frequently online. And that communication sort of requires that everybody has respect for each other. And that respect often is missing because of sort of unconscious biases, where guys and sometimes even women who believe they have no bias don't realize that there are small differences in communication styles between men and women. Sometimes they're large. differences that just make it harder for women to join a particular community. Because it's not just about writing the code. You have to sort of stand up for your code, defend your code, and there is a certain male attitude there that is endemic in many projects, where a woman, for example, would just not feel comfortable sort of claiming that she is right, that she has the sort of the correct insight to decide or to choose a solution, while a guy who knows less than that woman might honestly believe more in their own being right. And so they present a much more confident image. And so they have a much easier time, even when they're not actually all that competent, as long as they present confidence, they might get their inferior solution adopted. A woman will more likely feel that she has to have a perfect solution and a perfect understanding of the issues, why it's the perfect solution, before she will even submit a patch. I'm seeing this I'm doing a fair amount of mentoring of women specifically, and I found that sometimes women I'm mentoring, they ask for my approval for every step on the way. Like, they will say, I want to file an issue in the bug tracker, but I'm afraid of the negative backlash when I put the issue in. Can I tell you about what I want to write an issue about? That is charming, but I always tell them, just put it in the tracker already. Your head is not going to be bitten off. You'll get honest feedback, and whether the feedback is that's a good idea or that's a bad idea, it will be fine. But a guy wouldn't ask. I'm sure that a guy of the same skill level would not hesitate to just put the issue in the tracker. It's like sort of a bit of an attitude and mentality difference, which makes it much harder for competent women to sort of get started and stay afloat in this community, where the sort of the male attitude is the default attitude. Because if someone presents that uncertainty, they're much more likely to be ignored or rejected.
In open source world, sometimes people use their handle, they don't use their real name, and but what you're talking about, that it's not even about their identity, it's about they have this, women have, and I think it's also about our society, like when you go to playgrounds, you see the kids, boys, they climb up, they jump there, and
Yep.
Parents are fine. Girls, they play safe from the very beginning. So from the very
Oh,
early
yeah.
on, kids, boys are, kind of, our society have kind of conditioned them to take risk,
That's a good point.
Taking risks also make them, kind
risk
of.
taking is probably encouraged much more in boys than in girls.
So do you think that it's not just about technology? We have to change the society in general, the way we kind of treat girls versus boys, because no matter how many efforts you put in the open source world, if we don't change the way we raise our kids, it won't change.
Sure. To me, that is obvious. I mean, I've always felt that sort of feminism was right, and we need to change the whole society. And there is a caricature of feminists that some guys apparently are very concerned about. Well, that's a caricature. That is not how it is. But I don't necessarily want to wait. I mean,
That's true.
I have one kid. I'm sure as hell going to raise him with respect for women and for everyone. But where else can I have any influence at all?
Right.
That is in a project where I happen to still have a lot of moral authority. And so that's where I'm trying to set an example and sort of give people guidelines and encouragement rather than trying to just be an activist for change in all of society. I'm not really cut out for politics at the national level.
Right, that's true. And then, that is working on next generation, but we have some problem that has to be solved now. I was talking to somebody from, Susie, and she was like, she goes to events like that, and they are standing at the booth, and the guys people will come and they will ask questions to her colleague, not her.
Oh, yeah.
So she was like, the way you can be an ally is by, redirecting that question to me instead of answering that. So, but I think her male colleague, they don't even realize, they're good friends, but they don't realize that there is a bias going on. So at different levels, we don't have to work on the next generation. We can solve this problem whenever we see a problem, immediately mitigate it, by, she can explain better than me.
I sometimes have the opposite experience.
Oh, really?
Where in some tech situation, I see a woman and I ask her a technical question, and it turns out that she's not only the only woman there, but she's actually an admin or an organizer, and she's not a
tech person.
Yeah,
right. And I remember I was talking to Karen Sandler from the software conference, and she was like, she was going to one LinuxCon, and when she took an elevator and reached up, the hair at the back of her head raised because she was the only woman in the whole floor. So there are things which are, and we need to change it. But at the same time, open source kind of has the democratic model, where and you said that you are mentoring a lot of people. So what is the kind of your advice to projects, that a lot of projects, they do outreachy, like GNOME project has outreachy, and the Linux project has also adopted a code of conduct. But what is your advice either to the leaders or to the members of the projects who are, who want to make the change? What should they do?
The two things that I think are key are establish a code of conduct and sort of make it a good one, and then enforce it and advertise it so people know that you're using a code of conduct. And the other one is mentoring. And if team members find that the leadership is not responsive to that, they should speak up. And mentoring is a completely sort of distributed democratic approach. So you can always mentor. You can have a selection in who you mentor. I mean, it's got to click. Otherwise, a mentorship relationship isn't going to work anyway. So I personally make the choice that I only mentor women. And as of late, I also offer to mentor underrepresented minorities. But white guys can forget it, because they're not the ones who need it most.
But when it comes to mentoring, do you think there's also a need to mentor guys so that they are more conscious about their bias, so they can become an ally? Instead of,
to turn guys into allies, I don't know if the term would be mentoring. They certainly can use some education and information. Sometimes, I mean, there are some guys who are like super defensive when you tell them about this shit, but the majority of guys just don't know any better.
Right.
I mean, the first time I heard the term unconscious bias was maybe 5 years ago, and it was an eye-opener.
I know, yeah. So that's incredible, that you are doing this work, and I was not even aware of that. I was talking to someone from Adobe, and we concluded the interview, and I talked about hobbies, and he's from Mexico, so he said, I spend a lot of time in highlighting the work of because I am from Mexico, I'm an underrepresented minority.
Yep.
To bring it's a lot of incredible work is going on. So first of all, not only thanks for Python, but also thanks for doing this work. I think which is much more important than the code itself.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah. So before we kind of wrap this interview, one last thing, though I know that you may give me the answer. What do you do for fun when you're not mentoring or when you're not, okay, your child Python is grown up now, but what do you do in free time?
I mostly hang out with my family. We're a pretty close-knit little group. And I'm somewhat outdoorsy, so I like to go on bike rides and hikes. And yeah, we watch some Netflix and I read some books.
So what, are you watching Black Mirror and things like that, or you like to watch lighter stuff?
I have watched a bit of Black Mirror.
You liked it?
It was okay.
Uh-huh. It's too dark and too much about...
Usually when I turn on the TV, I'm looking for entertainment.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Not too yeah. So thanks so much for talking to me today. And for me, it's more like dream come true to sit down and talk to you. I'd be like, and so thanks again. And hopefully we'll see you again at maybe some next conference. Thank you.
Who knows?